So today, Woman 101. If someone asks you, how was man formed? How was woman formed? Actually, most of us will be agak-agak able to say something, able to say something. So you will be able to say, oh, man was, fashioned from the dust and the soil, from the earth. And of course, all of us will be also able to say that, Adam fell into a deep sleep, then God took his rib and then enclosed it in flesh and made woman. We all know this. But what we don't really pay more attention is, how come like that? Particularly, say, for the woman. Today, we all take it for granted. The woman was taken from the rib of the man's side. But why? And I think that's what I want to talk about today. And I believe majority or maybe even none of you have ever questioned why the rib. I mean, there are so many body parts, right? Okay, before your imagination goes crazy, I mean, why did God, for example, not take the tooth of man? Okay, so why did he not take the tooth of Adam and make into a woman? Of course, God can do anything, right? So why did he not take the tooth? So I reflected on that. And I thought, and the answer came to me quite quickly, actually, Because if God took Adam's tooth and gave it to the woman, then both of them will be very ticky, very steel teeth. They will be quarreling half the time. So I think God says better not. Don't give them more reason to be stubborn and quarrel. Okay, so maybe not the tooth. Why not the hair? Our hair, right? One strand of hair gives the entire DNA of the person, right? Today it's so easy, forensic. So why not one strand of hair and then we can create woman? And so again, I reflected. And again, the answer was quite clear why God did not take the strand of hair from Adam. Because if women took man's DNA, they will be like me, half bald, So probably not a good idea, Okay, but jokes aside. Why the rib? Why the rib? And it's a question I think many of us take it for granted. We just accept it, But we never really ask why. And so today I'd like to talk about it a little bit. Because if you took Adam's tooth as an adult, he will be bogey, right? Because technically as an adult, you take the tooth away, you won't grow again, correct or not? So if God took Adam's rib, wouldn't Adam be one less rib? And that is the interesting point. Because in my research and in my trying to find out more about it, I found out, and I'm not sure if you already know, that of all the bones in the human body, in the human anatomy, the rib bone is the only bone that can regenerate and heal itself, so long the bone is not badly damaged and not fully taken away. The rib bone is the only bone in the whole human body that can actually regrow and regenerate itself. Which is why today many researchers are trying to find out what is this amazing quality of the rib bone that the other bones, so if you break your arm, you break your leg or other hip, you need to go for a replacement. But the rib bone, strangely enough, can regenerate itself slowly, of course, which scientists are wondering, how can we replicate this amazing quality? But in any case, I'm not going to talk about science today, but at least that answers my question. Why did God take the rib of man to form woman and not be worried about it? It's because eventually, Adam will not be one less rib because it will grow again. So he will not be one less rib and then forever blame the woman for his deficiency. Because of you, therefore, I'm not complete. So anyway, the able to regenerate itself makes Adam still a complete man again. So that's one of the reasons, amongst many, which I'm still not done yet. But why did not God fashion woman the same way as man? Man, or Adam, of course, was fashioned from the earth or from the dust. At least that's what the gospel or the scripture says. But notice that the woman wasn't formed that way. Right? She was from the rib of man and clothed in flesh. So the theological answer, perhaps, or at least reasoning to this as we try to understand why God did not fashion woman from scratch like man, was that God did not want to go back from scratch like man as well. He was en route in his creation. And so to form woman immediately, quickly from the side of man, there's one important factor. That the very fact that woman was taken from the side of man and formed proves that the woman is of the same species as man. Remember how God brought him animals, birds, animals, and Adam looked at that and says, no, nothing looks suitable for me because the anatomy of an animal or a bird doesn't attract me at all. But this now woman is from me, or we share rather the same anatomy, the same human skeletal, and therefore there is compatibility. But more importantly is that when Adam was formed in the likeness of God. We all know that man was formed in the image and the likeness of God. And so when woman was formed by taking the rib from Adam and therefore coming from the same species of Adam, so if Adam is the image of God and woman came from Adam, therefore this proves that the woman is also created in the image of God. That's the key point. That at the end of the day, both men and women are equal because they are created in the image of God. And that is why when Adam finally saw Eve, he says, finally, this is bone from my bones, flesh from my flesh. Not because, and she doesn't look like a bird or a rhinoceros or whatever you sometimes call your wife, looks like me. We are the same. And so therefore God says the two of you are equal because you are formed in my image. And therefore God says to them, now you husband and wife, you Adam and Eve, go forth, be fruitful, and you multiply. And of course the children that comes, procreation from the husband and wife, all your children will look like the parents. And since the parents look like God, and therefore the children will also be images of God. So if any of you who have young children or have grandchildren, and you say, ayo, my child, my grandchild, behave like a monkey, then there's something wrong with your rib. Because all your children are not animals. They are all in the image of God. So anyway, still on the ribs. But why? There's still many other body parts that we can justify, but why the rib? So I ask you the next question now. Where are our ribs positioned in our bodies? So agak-agak lah, we all know it's somewhere here, right? Near the heart, under the arms. Okay, so that's where our ribs are positioned, right? And the rib, in that sense, is very close to our heart and very close to our arms. And this is actually the most intimate part of our lives when we hug somebody. So it's different from a handshake. When we hug somebody, we connect. We share with one another our lives. And as husband and wives, as you snuggle in bed together, not that I know, I swear, but as you snuggle in bed together, there is that sharing of your lives. There is that intimacy where your both ribs, so to speak, come together. That the woman as well, being formed from the rib of man, remember what our ribs are for. Our ribs are meant to protect us, isn't it? That's what the rib cage is for. And so therefore, as woman is formed from man's ribs, the woman, therefore, is also seen close to the heart of man, but also as a protector of man, that you both help protect each other, that you are a cherished, integral part of each other's life. There is unity because you give each other that solidarity, that guidance, that help, that protection for one another. At the same time, where are our ribs positioned? They are positioned in the middle of the body, which is exactly why God also didn't take anything from the top, like a hair or the eye or the tooth, and then create woman, because we don't want to create an image that the woman, for example, is superior to the man. And similarly, God didn't take from his toes or his toenail or his heel to create a woman, because we don't want to say that woman was created subordinate to man. But rather, God took from the side of Adam, in the middle part, which shows that woman was formed to journey side by side with man as an equal. As an equal, not as a superior, not as an inferior, but as an equal that supports each other side by side. And then therefore, God says that's why woman is important for the life of man. Remember, before he formed woman, he looked at the man and said, it is not good for man to be alone. I will form him a helper. Now, this word helper is a bit tricky, because you anyhow interpret it, it will go haywire, isn't it? When God says that man needs a helper, God is not saying that man is so hopeless and helpless, you need a woman to help him. Although I see all the women now, and the word helper is also not saying that, women are meant to help men. They're supposed to be servants and slaves of the man. But now you see all the men nodding their heads. Yeah, correct. No. Women, as a helper to men, the word helper actually means to complement, to put together. Not compliment as to praise, but complement. Because, as what Jesus said, or rather, as what God said, it is not good for men to be alone. Meaning to say, on our own, we cannot fulfill our biggest potential. We cannot be the fullness of ourselves by being alone. But when we have found that spouse complements us, but I would say that spouse completes us. That is why it's not good to be alone, as what God says. We come together. And therefore, in the holy sacrament of matrimony, for those of you who are already married, on the day of your marriage, it is actually an amazing moment of a holy jigsaw. A holy jigsaw where you and your spouse are nicely fitted together. And this jigsaw that has been fit together in church in the presence of God is because not that you chose him or he chose you or her or she chose you, but that God chose both of you together. God knows that the two of you were made for each other and you both agree in the presence of God. That's why on your marriage day in church, in the presence of God, you say, I accept. With the help of Almighty God, I see you as my equal. I see you as one who perfects my life. Which is why Jesus says in the gospel today, therefore, any artificial separation of man and wife breaks this holy bond that God has united. What God unites, you cannot divide. But when God unites, it is with your consent, of course. So God now has united us, and today reminds us that on that day of our marriage, we really make each other whole and perfect. And therefore, as we continue in our marriage life, and I know marriage life is not easy. I may not be married, but I understand that married life has its challenges. We poke each other's ribs all the time in our lives, it's true. But that can be overcome always when God is part of your relationship. It's when God is devoid of your relationship, God is absent in your family, that you will find problems in your married life. But if you recall the day when you were sanctified in church on your married day, with God in the presence of your union, that is where we overcome all things. And that is the message perhaps for each and every one of us today, that we look at each other in our married life as equals. And for those of you who are contemplating to be married, or you know of your next generation working towards their married life, beautiful. I continue to encourage, I continue to pray for these couples who are waiting to get married. Continue to know each other, love each other, and most importantly, have a firm resolve that on our married day, God will be part of our relationship, part of this holy jigsaw. And for those of us who are remaining single, perhaps, and maybe even thinking of a life of the vocation of a religious sister, religious brother, or even to the priesthood, I speak for myself today, you trust me, I am never alone. God says, it is not good for man to be alone. But I tell you, I'm never alone. Because in today, when we have made our vows, or when we are ordained to the priesthood, on that very day, we are never alone. We take Jesus as our spouse. Jesus becomes our spouse. And just as woman was formed from the rib of man and become an equal companion to God, I want to see myself that in that day, on that day when I was ordained or when I profess my vows and I become a spouse of Jesus, I am formed myself from the side of Jesus himself. I am from his holy ribs. But, sisters and brothers, whatever state of life you are in, single, married, or maybe, your lifelong partner has returned to the Lord, you currently are alone. Whatever state of life you are in, we can still find joy if Christ is in our lives, whatever state of life. And of course, the most beautiful thing is knowing that we have the next generation and we have family members to always support us. And today in our Mass, we have the next generation, 2 young children, Caleb and Kayla, I hope I pronounced it correctly, who will receive their first Holy Communion today. And we want to pray and congratulate them because today they will receive the Lord fully.